We are now cut off from all communication with the country, and many people must soon perish with famine in this place. This was the diary entry of Boston Loyalist resident Miss Anne Halton in April of 1775. Little did Anne and the other residents in the town of Boston know that a 9-month siege lay ahead of them, and the American Revolutionary War had just begun. When George Washington came to the Vassal House at 105 Brattle Street in July of 1775 to assume command of the Continental Army, he and his generals were uncertain of the momentous task that lay ahead. It's safe to assume that Washington and his staff would often look out from the property that is now Longfellow House, Washington's headquarters National Historic Site, the first headquarters of the American military, to their troops in the town of Boston across the Charles River, and ask themselves, how can we possibly achieve victory? Following the battles of Lexington and Concord on April 19, 1775, militiamen and patriots followed the retreating British regulars back to Boston and Charlestown. A melting pot of thousands of people came to surround the town of Boston. Thousands of men of African, European, and American descent came to aid the besiegement of the town. Also joining the camps were hundreds of women and children, mostly refugees after the battles of Lexington and Concord and later the Battle of Bunker Hill, who cooked, did laundry, and traveled with the soldiers, contributing however they could in the fight for liberty. Dorothea Gamsey was about 10 years old when the conflict erupted in 1775. Visiting her loyalist uncle Sir George Nutting in Boston, Dorothea got stuck in the city until the end of the siege in March of 1776. She witnessed the Battle of Bunker Hill in June. Writing to her granddaughter years later, she recounted, "Then came a night when there was a battle, anxiety and watching, unable to sleep when everybody seemed wide awake, and the streets full of people. It was scarcely daylight when the booming of the cannon on board the ships in the harbor shook every house in the city. My aunt fainted, and I screamed with all my might." Not only were the constant skirmishes and occasional battles wearing on the general population of the town, conditions quickly deteriorated within Boston. In January of 1776, Anne Halton described patriot prisoners and those in the city, writing, "There are numerous but in wretched condition in rags, dirt, and vermin with consequent distempers," and would go on to describe conditions in the city. Amidst all these alarms, dangers, and distress, the smallpox spread universally, which obliged them to inoculate the children. Dear creatures, God preserve them and support their parents in this day of trial. The Loyalists found themselves in constant worry of a full mounted attack from the Patriot troops, fearing that they would enter the town and commence a slaughter. But patriots who lived within the city also had fears and found life difficult. Sarah Winslow Deming, the wife of John Deming, a militia captain, described her experience in Boston in her journal, writing, "I was very unquiet from the moment I was informed that more troops were coming to Boston. 'Tis true that those who had wintered there had not given us much molestation, but an additional strength I dreaded and determined if possible to get out of their reach and take with me as much as my little interest as I could." John Andrews was a merchant from Boston who was sympathetic to the Patriot cause. He wrote to his brother-in-law in June of 1775, explaining the constant fear of his belongings being stolen by British troops confined within the town limits. "I find an absolute necessity to be here myself, as the soldiery think they have a license to plunder everyone's house and store who leaves the town." John would stay in Boston during the entirety of the siege, even though his family left, in an effort to protect their property from the theft and destruction. Throughout his stay, John found it hard to find food and survive the winter, but his sympathy still remained with the American cause for liberty. Andrew Elliott was the minister of the new North Church congregation. He made great efforts to get his family out of Boston, but found it was his duty to stay with the members of his congregation who got left behind the siege lines. He was also sympathetic to the Patriot cause and summed up the conditions of Boston during the siege, writing to his friend Thomas B. Hollis, "The unhappy situation of this town, filled with the troops of Britain and surrounded with the provincial army, all communication with the country is cut off, and we wholly deprived of the necessities of life." After 9 months, the siege of Boston officially came to an end on March 17, 1776, colloquially known today as Evacuation Day. Fearing the Patriot forces would fire down on them from Dorchester Heights, the British negotiated peace and left the port town, resulting in the Continental Army's first major victory. Though Washington used the house on Brattle Street as his first headquarters for 9 months, his short time in Cambridge was extremely formative in the character of the Continental Army and would go on to influence how they would fight and eventually claim victory in the 8-year struggle for liberty. Too often in homefront wars, civilians are pushed from being spectators to the horrors of war to active participants. Even with the United States eventually claiming a hard-fought victory against the Crown, those citizens who were forced to suffer, to lose, and to rebuild their homes because of this conflict can never be forgotten.